Dominique Thorne, I have seen all of the first 3 episodes of Ironheart.
Yeah, and it's like the real Tony Stark. It's like back somehow, and there's like a moment where she's flying through, and he's like, "Who is that?" And she's like, "I'm Ironheart, Mr. Stark." And he's like, "I like that girl."
Is where Downey Jr. pointed out to both Marvel and Disney that this could not only ruin his reputation, but also cost him fans, and he's against making those statements. However, both Bob and Kevin informed him that taking part in these types of statements and the press tour for Ironheart is built into his very expensive contract for the future of the MCU, mostly related to the return in Avengers Doomsday. RDJ is already challenging both Bob Iger and Kevin Feige that he will only make statements defending Ironheart and Riri Williams if it avoids arguments about DEI.
It was just one sentence. Quiet, almost casual. No anger, no insults. Just a moment of reflection from the man who started it all. But within 24 hours, it had sparked a storm Marvel couldn't contain and buried an entire series in the process. Robert Downey Jr. wasn't even promoting a Marvel project. He wasn't trying to make headlines. It was just a podcast, a laid-back chat about acting, legacy, and life after Tony Stark.
Where all of that came from. And that to me is super familiar with Mr. Tony Stark over there wanting to cloak the world in a suit of armor.
Then came the question, something simple like, how do you feel seeing other characters take up the Iron Man mantle? Downey paused, smiled. Then he said it. Tony wasn't a costume. He was a man. Flawed, selfish, broken. He earned that armor. I don't know if that's what we're seeing anymore. That was all. No names, no accusations. But the ripple effect was instant.
They also had Robert Downey Jr., and they had him roll out and really kind of prop the show up and prop the character of Riri Williams up above Tony Stark, and really tried to really have him really as the face of the Ironheart press tour, and it really just backfired completely.
Fans clipped the quote. Headlines twisted it. YouTube channels exploded.
It deserves your attention. Ironheart deserves your attention.
TikToks racked up millions of views. And suddenly, a show that most people had barely noticed, Ironheart, became the center of cultural firestorm. Marvel stayed silent. They didn't defend the series. They didn't clarify the quote. And they definitely didn't expect what would happen next. Internal backlash, canceled contracts, and a quiet, brutal shutdown of the entire production. This is the story of how one offhand comment from Robert Downey Jr. triggered a chain reaction inside Marvel Studios and exposed a deeper truth about the franchise's future. And it all started with a single sentence. When Ironheart dropped on Disney+, it didn't feel like a Marvel event.
I recall when they forced Robert Downey Jr., they made a deal with him to take part in the press tour to prop up Riri Williams, played by Dominique Thorne, on multiple talk show programs out there, a lot of which were, of course, affiliated with Disney. We'll talk more about that down the road. However, this is where it gets really intense, because we know that Robert Downey Jr. is a very busy man right now. He is heavily involved with Avengers Doomsday.
There was no red carpet, no late-night interviews, no viral trailer buzz. Just a quiet 6-episode upload on a random Thursday. No theatrical tie-in. No big final battle to tease in the trailer. Just there. Another side project in the ever-growing pile of Marvel's Phase 5 content. And to be fair, the setup had potential. Riri Williams, played by Dominique Thorne, had been introduced in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. She was brilliant and grounded in a way that echoed a younger Tony Stark. Fans were intrigued. On paper, Ironheart should have worked. A genius kid building her own suit of armor? That's practically a love letter to the roots of the franchise. But something was off. The first season came and went without leaving much of a mark.
Bob and Kevin refused, and they are forcing him to make statements to go against Marvel fans that are opposed to the Riri Williams character. Now, RDJ is also very annoyed with Marvel and Disney after they initially forced him to do PR and become a part of the press tour, since it was built into his contract for Doomsday, with the show promised to be a...
Reviews were polite. Functional was the word critics kept using. The action was fine. The visuals were clean. The performances were solid, but none of it landed. The show floated instead of flying. Behind the scenes, it was even messier. Budget cuts slashed key sequences. Entire scenes were rewritten mid-shoot. A cameo featuring a holographic Stark AI was filmed, then cut after Marvel's legal team stepped in. The vibe wasn't creative chaos, it was survival. And yet, despite all that, Marvel moved forward with Season 2, quietly, confidently, like they believed it didn't need fixing. But something was already cracking under the surface.
Going out there from the media that you are just a racist if you don't like Ironheart. The reason it's getting this backlash, the reason it's getting bad reviews, the reason that fans don't like what they see, it's just because all the damn racists out there, Jay.
One major development that is now active involves drama surrounding Robert Downey Jr. in the midst of the Ironheart ratings nightmare. Now, already Robert Downey Jr. is enraged with both Disney and Marvel, as well as Marvel fans. Already Bob Iger and Kevin Feige held a recent emergency call/meeting that included Robert Downey Jr. remotely, where they were pressuring him to make a
And all it would take was one voice to break it wide open. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Just a quick podcast appearance, squeezed between press junkets for a non-Marvel drama. A laid-back, low-stakes interview. No superhero talk on the agenda. No surprises expected, until the host tossed out one harmless question. How do you feel seeing the next generation wear the suit? Downey smiled. That slow, thoughtful kind of smile. The kind that usually comes with a diplomatic answer. And for a moment, it looked like he'd give one. But then, he paused. Tony wasn't a costume, he said. He was a man. Flawed, broken, selfish. He earned that armor. I don't know if that's what we're seeing anymore. That's it. No names, no targeting. Just honesty. But the internet doesn't need names to start a fire. Within hours, the quote was clipped, captioned, and going viral. Headlines twisted it into something sharper. Downey Jr. slams Marvel's new heroes. TikTok flooded with reactions. Fan forums erupted. And a show most people hadn't even finished, suddenly found itself in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't that Downey attacked the show. He didn't even mention it. But the implication hit like a hammer. If the man who built the franchise didn't believe in the new era, why should anyone else? Marvel didn't respond. They assumed the noise would die down, but the silence only made it louder. At first, Marvel tried to brush it off. One comment, one wave of reactions. They'd seen worse, right? But this one didn't fade. It built. And it didn't just come from fans. It came from everywhere. YouTube channels lit up overnight with breakdowns and commentary. Reaction streamers rewatched the clip on loop. TikToks stitched Downey's quote over montages of Tony Stark's most iconic moments. And every post about Ironheart, no matter how neutral, was drowned in replies. Tony Stark gifs, comments like, he wouldn't have approved. And the one that showed up most, she didn't earn. Critics began quietly joining in. Not overt attacks, but side remarks about the franchise losing its soul. And inside Marvel, things started to shift. Not officially, not on paper, but in whispers. Meetings suddenly felt colder. Questions that had been ignored for months were finally being asked, like whether Ironheart was really connecting with anyone at all. Then came the leaks. A Reddit post, later verified, exposed an internal Marvel email. We can't afford another Echo situation. That was the turning point. Echo, another underpromoted Marvel show, had been buried without ceremony after flopping in silence. And now Ironheart was being compared to it, not as a warning, but as a precedent. Suddenly, Downey's quote wasn't a controversy, it was a conversation starter. And it gave them Dana Walden, Kevin Feige, Alan Bergman, even a lawyer from corporate IP protection. The agenda was short and chilling. Assess the future of Ironheart Season 2. The meeting lasted just 47 minutes. No brainstorming, no debates. By the end, the verdict was in. Season 2 was canceled. Not delayed, not retooled. Canceled, effective immediately. Writers were released from their contracts that same day. Production schedules were wiped. Soundstage reservations were dropped. Calls went out, not to the media, but to licensing partners, merch teams, and tie-in comic writers. The message was blunt. Wind it down, quietly. Inside the writer's room, the news hit like a gut punch. One assistant recalled that the shutdown came mid-scene breakdown. One moment, they were planning character arcs. 10 minutes later, the room was locked. No final drafts. No wrap-up meetings. Just a silent exit and a text message. We're done. Dominique Thorne didn't even get a phone call. Just a forwarded PDF from Agent, formal notice of her contract termination. No message from Marvel. No words from Feige. Just silence. Marvel didn't make a statement. Didn't offer an explanation. Instead, they let the narrative play out online, letting Downey's quote take the heat. But inside, the real reason was clear. Ironheart wasn't just underperforming. It had become a liability. On paper, Ironheart was doing what Marvel had always done, passing the torch. A young genius picks up where an old hero left off. It worked before, right? But this time, something was different. And Marvel's own internal data confirmed it. Viewer completion rates for Ironheart were some of the lowest in the franchise's streaming history. Less than 1/3 of viewers who started the show even finished it within 30 days. Toy sales were nearly non-existent. Tie-in comics barely moved. And worse, every new post about the series, whether promotional or unrelated, was hijacked by the same reaction: frustration. The problem was Williams. It wasn't Dominique Thorne. It wasn't even the suit. It was the idea behind it, that legacy could be handed out like merchandise, that fans would cheer for a new face just because it wore an old symbol. Marvel's engagement analytics labeled it downward volatile, the same tag used months earlier for the Marvels. Same trend, same fatigue, same resistance. But with Ironheart, a new pattern emerged: legacy rejection. Audiences weren't rejecting new characters. They were rejecting the replacement of old ones without the emotional weight that made them matter. Tony Stark's story wasn't about the suit. It was about the man inside it. And Marvel had forgotten that. Downey hadn't taken a shot at Riri. He never even said her name. But his words hit a nerve because deep down, fans agreed. You don't inherit legacy, you earn it. Inside Marvel, panic wasn't public, but it was very real, behind the scenes. Executives scrambled to reassess not just Ironheart, but the entire phase roadmap. Because this wasn't just about one show underperforming. It was about a pattern, a slow, creeping realization that their strategy might be collapsing. Projects were suddenly paused. The Young Avengers pitch was shelved indefinitely. Armor Wars, once a movie, then a show, now a question mark, was quietly reshuffled again. A full sequence in Avengers Secret Wars, featuring Riri Williams and a multiverse Tony Stark, was removed in a script rewrite. No announcement, no comment, just erased. Then came the whispers. Phrases like earned legacy started showing up in internal notes. Executives began asking uncomfortable questions. Who's really at the heart of this story? Why should audiences care? For years, Marvel's formula had been to build characters from the ground up. Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, T'Challa. Flawed people who grew into icons. But somewhere along the way, that shifted. Symbols were passed around, names reused, costumes recycled. And now the data was forcing T. Face a hard truth. Fans didn't want a lineup of familiar logos worn by strangers. They wanted characters with arcs, with stakes, with meaning. Replacing icons wasn't just risky, it was alienating. And Marvel, they were running out of room to keep pretending otherwise. The irony? Downey's comment didn't just end something, It reopened something Marvel thought was closed forever. Just weeks after the Ironheart fallout, rumors began swirling. Tony Stark might be coming back. At first, it sounded like fan fiction, but then came the reports. Marvel was exploring options to bring Downey back in Avengers: Secret Wars. Not full-time, not resurrected, but a multiverse version, a one-time appearance that could reset the stakes and maybe reset the fans' faith. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was strategy. Stark represented something Marvel had lost: emotional gravity. And bringing him back, even for a moment, was a signal, a way to say, "We hear you." Negotiations are ongoing. Downey hasn't, but the door's open now. And in the wake of everything Ironheart failed to be, Marvel might need him more than ever. Ironheart wasn't just a canceled show. It was a mirror. It forced Marvel to look at what it had become, a studio chasing formulas instead of building foundations. For years, the magic was never about the suits or towers. It was about people. Imperfect, messy, compelling people who earned their place. What Ironheart exposed was that you can't fast-track legacy. You can't copy and paste greatness and expect the same results. Fans didn't reject Riri Williams because she was new. They rejected the shortcut. The idea that legacy could be passed down without the journey that made it matter. Marvel now stands at a crossroads. Keep pushing out safe, forgettable content, or slow down, refocus, and rebuild with the same heart that started it all. Because one thing's clear, audiences are no longer just watching. They're holding the studio accountable. In the end, IR wasn't the disaster everyone claims it was. It was the warning sign Marvel didn't want to see. A reminder that legacy isn't just about passing the torch, it's about earning the flame. The silence around the show's cancellation wasn't just strategic, it was symbolic. Marvel, for the first time, seemed unsure of its next move. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe this pause is what the franchise needed. A reset, a moment to remember why fans showed up in the first place. Not for suits or CGI spectacle, but for stories that meant something. Characters who bled, broke, evolved. And now, with the return of Stark on the table and the future of Marvel hanging in the balance, one question remains. Will they learn from this? Or will Ironheart just become another forgotten name in a franchise that forgot how to feel?